Hello, everybody. It's Kontinent TV online. My name is Igor Tsesarsky, and today we're meeting with our expert, the economist, public figure Andrei Illarionov, my colleague Elena Prigova, and Andrei. Hello, welcome. Good evening, Igor. Good evening, Elena. And let's start today with our agenda. Elena, mic is yours. I, sometimes think when people of high caliber, public figures, leave this world, they have changed a lot of things during their life, but the life also changes after they leave. And when I see modern America, when I see what's happening here, I have a weird feeling as if I'm in some time machine that is taking me to the future but backwards. When I hear what our American democratic politicians are suggesting to the society, offering us, I have to remind people, and I want to remind people about Soviet Union. And today we are talking about what Kamala Harris is suggesting in her economic component of her program. Presidential candidate from Democrats had promised American citizens to lower the cost of life if she wins the coming elections. How is she going to lower that cost that they actually have elevated before? They were the ones who done it. She's saying that the economy of the United States is the strongest, but many citizens are not feeling that progress in their daily life. So many citizens is us. We do not feel that progress. And she made these remarks on the 16th of August during her speech and the meeting with her supporters in North Carolina. If to analyze what she is saying, she states that she seriously concerns and wants to help middle class. And she wants to raise the quality of life for that class and wants to make everybody middle class. But somehow, during the recent years, this middle class was actively being eroded and dismantled. Andrei, what did you notice in that speech? What is not consumable? And how do we live looking at this economy from Kamala Harris? Well, first of all, Elena, we probably need to say that this is probably her first somewhat programmatic statement coming from Kamala. Before that, there was nothing of a kind, and I don't think we are yet to see anything soon. Maybe there'll be something in the convention that is upon us that we could use and analyze, but for today, this is the only somewhat sequential and logical speech and statement. What her, probably not even herself, but her whole team are offering to American people and what they're planning to implement in life in case this disaster happens in November and they get power. In one of her comments, she said that this is my plan for the first presidential term. So they're not disguising, they're not hiding from people that they're planning to take power for 2 terms, not for 1 term. And since Obama also came out and said that he will be helping Kamala, that we can gather that together. And right, there was a Obama term, then maybe another Biden, then maybe 2 terms of Kamala. So, or perhaps somebody else they appoint after her. So as they're making a statement, we're here forever, right? They came here for a long term, and they verbatim are saying we are here to stay. We're not going to leave. So that's the main thing that is worth of notion, and that our listeners and viewers can pay attention to. That these citizens are not going to go anywhere, and they're going to use all the instruments at their disposal to stay in power. What instruments do they have? And both that speech of Kamala Harris and Biden's statement at the convention, it showed again that perhaps for me and for you as well, back like in the Soviet Union, I am amazed with the amount of lies and manipulation that is coming from the stage. So we grew up back in the Soviet Union with some image of the West following certain rules and certain suit of behavior. And that was one of the characteristics of the West. But what we're seeing today, that group of, I don't know which word to use here, mischiefs, scoundrels, they do not have any tools or any mechanisms that they use to hold themselves. They're putting a phrase regularly from stage. I'm going to be doing this, and Trump is going to be doing that. But everything that she just said about Trump was false. She was saying that Trump is going to raise taxes for this, taxes for that. Trump has never made such a statement. It is not even in the program 2025, to which she regularly defers. These lines don't exist in that program. And by the way, Trump made a comment when he got acquainted with that program 25. He acknowledged that he is aware of this program, but he never endorsed it. He never supported that. He doesn't even support that program officially. So with amazing ease, both Biden and Kamala, they both ascribe to their ideological and political counterparts all these statements and features that they have never said. And Democratic Party used to have a lot of rather good people in it, but none of them, or still, many of whom are still alive, still have power and public value, they're not coming out and saying that, hey, this is false. Let's fight with our opponents in an honest way. We may disagree with them on certain matters, and let's address the matters. Let's not invent falsities. And that would be at least honest, because from the point of view of classic Democratic Party, that would be the right way, or would have been the right way. For that, you don't need to dive to the bottom and invent things and rake the mug with the full spoon. That's what they're doing. But that's their style, as is. So as for contents of her speech, we can keep discussing that ad nauseum, but some points, as you mentioned, she's going to elevate the quality of life and make it less expensive. I was looking at some data. Okay, the cost of life is determined by the dynamics of inflation. With other conditions remaining the same, inflation is the defining parameter you can use to define whether the quality of life is getting better or worse. What was under Trump? When he got the power, the inflation was over 2% annually, but by 2019, it went down to 1.4. And I'm using 2019 as the milestone specifically because while analyzing Trump's rule and Biden's rule, you want to exclude the last year of Trump's presidency and first year of Biden's presidency, because on those economic parameters of those 2 years, 2020 and 2021, were significantly affected by COVID. All the parameters indeed went haywire, a lot of things were changing, and economic situation was very non-standard. So objective, honest economic analysis demands to exclude the last year from Trump's analysis and the first year from Biden's analysis, and analyze the periods where COVID did not have much effect or any effect on the economy. So the first 3 years of Trump and the last 3 years of Biden and Harris. And what do we see? In the first 3 years of Trump, inflation was lowered significantly to 1.4, and even by American measures, this is a very low number. What happened after COVID was done with? Under Biden and Harris, inflation jumped up to 9.1 in the annual measurement in 22. It jumped for a reason, because administration of Biden and Harris has pumped American economy with unsupported money, which having pumped into consumer market, wholesale market, all the markets, had led to unprecedented growth of inflation. The last time America has seen such inflation was at the end of 70s, beginning of 80s. America has not had inflation like that for 40 years. This was due to this administration activity. Now, this inflation indeed went down from 9.1 to 3%. This is the last measurement, according to July of this year, 2024. But it's still over twice more than what we had at the end of 19 under Trump. How much did the price level grow and that cost of life grow that Mrs. Harris is going to fight with? During the reign of Biden and Harris administration, she did mention, and the price for the main consumer goods indeed had risen by 50%. And she mentioned without shame a bunch of different groups that indeed the major consumer goods, food items, prices have risen by 50%. Whose achievement is that? Of course, Biden and Harris administration. And the main conclusion, how can that be fought with? The main way, the main economically viable way, is to provide for economic growth without pumping more money into the market. There was zero in her speech about how is she going to achieve that. Nothing about her advisors, what are their thoughts, what's the pathway, nothing like that in her speech. Everything that she talked about was about adding more money to the market. When government pumps more money for this, more money for that, more money for something else, the only outcome we can expect from that is increasing inflation. And another element that definitely got the center stage was her statement about having to control prices. And here one wanted to say that controlling prices is the epoch of economic thought during the military communism times of Soviet Union. Soviet economy and other communist-like economies around the world have tried that, have faced the damages of this regulation, and after having done that, no serious country is even considering that. In Zimbabwe, they refuse to control their prices. And now, presidential candidate in the United States, not somebody, but United States, is suggesting to implement price control. You know, Orwell could have written something like that, and it seemed phantasmagorical. And this was stemming from the tragedy of the Second World War, when, due to the big war raging in Europe and around the world, a lot of goods were subjected to financial regulations. But it was a different epoch. And after 100 years of very diverse experience, where in every country, in different societies, where it was tried, it showed that it is a dead-end way that leads to destruction of not only just level of life, but even the core matter, core fabric of society. We all of a sudden have a presidential candidate in the United States who is verbatim dumping that tremendous, amazing bullshit on the ears of everybody who is listening. Well, thank you for remembering Orwell. I think it's very timely. I'm trying to reread some of his works, but I do have the feeling that we talked that, yeah, indeed, he was sort of having a foresight, but even his fantasy is not deep enough to reflect what is actually happening. But again, he was drawing the 20th century, or even 21st, so some things have exacerbated. But I wanted to ask you, Andrei, why do you think that left media that was supposed to be eating from the hand of the government, who was very enthusiastically usually supporting different lies and stupidities spewed by left administration, all of a sudden started attacking Kamala after her speeches, like Washington Post and many others? They started to actively criticize her statements. Why do you think is that happening? Igor, I have not reviewed a lot of these statements, so I am not ready to exactly address what they said, but I'll trust you. If they did that, perhaps looking at the conditions of election campaign, where even during that situation where any statement is basically a ball in your goal post or in the enemy's or opposing party, even in this situation, I guess left media are understanding that such a statement is not just madness, it's just utter destruction. So they perhaps are, and maybe that's a more rational explanation, that they are concerned that statements like this, theses like this, slogans like this, if they are used by Kamala, they will lead to a significant part of potential electorate who otherwise would be ready to vote for her, would turn away from her. And this is perhaps the last attempt to change in jump and redress her in air and perhaps pull her away from the abyss, because she's so enthusiastically running towards it that she might pull not only herself but the whole Democratic Party down to the abyss. And it's not a surprise that she is actually, she showed, according to different polling and results of her voting, that she was the leftmost when she was in the Senate with Bernie Sanders. She was actually next to Bernie, and very often she found herself, or she was found rather, even more to the left than Bernie. If we look at the Russian parliament, post-USSR, we had very few people of that kind who went that far to the left. And here it's not only that she was present in the Senate, she was also presidential, she is a presidential candidate right now. So perhaps this is a collective left's attempt to save their campaign and to not let the other side, Republicans, and significant part of the political middle of the United States, who were rather surprised about these suggestions coming from Kamala, they're afraid that everything will bury her campaign and their chances for success. You know, Andrei, it was such a publication as Washington Post who was criticizing her. Another publication, New York Times, wrote that the coup is still a coup, or turnover is a turnover, when Biden basically was removed from political stage. He agreed finally that he will not participate in the presidential race, and instead of her, Kamala popped as the first candidate to replace him. If you listen to any streams by Alan Dershowitz, Jonathan Turley, Levin, all these streams are dedicated to the thing that she had no right to get such a nomination from Democratic Party, that endorsement, because 0.0% had voted for them who should have voted for her. She got the reign as inheritance, having pushed Biden out of the picture. But now we are dealing with what we're dealing, and her own party continues to promote her. I want to pause on a topic that she suggested: strong middle class. How in these conditions, when we have unregulated illegal immigration that takes billions and trillions out of the pockets of American taxpayers, right from that middle class that is paying taxes, how can we restore and empower middle class again when that government pocket becomes huge, bottomless, external debt is growing, and what can that end with? Well, you know, I would pay attention not to the politics that she is suggesting. We can discuss how or whether it works for middle class or it doesn't. That's discussable, sure. We started to touch upon that, and we'll probably get back to it and here and in other streams. But I want to pay attention to another thing. Her speech and her program are, as they say in English, divisive. It's seriously dividing society, and it creates contradictions inside the American society. This is the rare case when you can compare her statement with Trump's statements. Again, leave the real economic program aside and real politics that they both are working aside. Trump, in all his recent statements, especially on the convention, said directly that I am going to be a president for all Americans. Of course, us Republicans, but we do not forget about Democrats and independents. I am working for all. Kamala purposely is trying to separate American society into parts. This is what Obama was doing during his presidency when he was trying to separate American society by race and by attitude to that matter and create additional racial-related issues with American society and inspire certain hatred within one part of American society against the other. And that's exactly what Kamala is doing now. She's trying to contradict middle class against the wealthiest and the rich, and also separating them from the lower income. So she's addressing the middle class and then says, and everybody else, all the rest. So who are all the rest, right? Here she is demonstrating again her Bolshevik agenda, where there are two groups, the oppressed and the oppressors, where there are rich and poor, where there are people of one color or the other. That politics is always based on juxtaposition. This is all core of their politics, of Biden and Obama. When Biden administration or Biden team was working on this campaign back in the 20s, they were also contradicting them and pitching them against the other, but Kamala is doing it even brighter. So this is politics to separate American society. And that only confirms the Bolshevik character by nature. Divisive, not uniting character. All right, Andrei, so the Congress of Democratic Party that was going, and I can start with some numbers, if I may. So before this Congress, we were reading that it will be an unforgettable experience for somebody, and for the others it would be regular, and for somebody the most important thing would probably be not exactly what's happening in the hall, but what is happening around it. For me, what was happening around that convention was more colorful and more interesting in depiction of what we are turning into. We Americans who live here in this country, who observe all that lawlessness. And it leads to rather serious and sad thoughts. Although we've seen at the previous conventions the burning of American flags and all other attributes. Elena, perhaps you can give some numbers, how many people were there, etc., and we can talk more. I want to say the following. Yesterday I was trying to monitor that convention. It started in the evening. They usually work in the evening. What surprised me was that crowd, a very reminiscent of Antifa that we saw in 2020. But this time, they are under the flags of Palestine, shouting about Intifada. These Americans came to the Democratic Party convention, to a convention of American Party that had fenced itself from their electors, from their voters. These people were grown up, were bred by this party, the ones who are screaming these anti-Semitic slogans. People offering abortion right here at place, who are offering to change the face of our country to pander to minorities. Supposedly minorities are now deciding everything, and they're ready to destroy this country in favor of minorities. And it was interesting to observe the statements, anti-Semitic statements they had. They gathered about 160,000 from all across the country, and they got there not because they knew day and time, but they got a certain notification in their Telegram channel, and they were using Telegram to gather. This was the tool of choice for a lot of students who occupied a lot of university territories and were destroying and raising ruckus and different universities, all those pro-Hamas demonstrations. So now we can see a coordinated, a concerted situation when they coordinate their efforts via Telegram. Telegram has a dark history with Russia, the origins in Russia, and they are added to the registry of not friendly. They're not specifically cancelled, but they're observed in detail on the territory of the United States. So we have a group that is trying to change the situation around our elections. What do you think it will end with? Well, Elena, I'm right. I would not go as far as saying that Telegram is owned by Russian special services. It is just a difficult story and a long story of the creator and his relations with Russian special services and the keys, decryption keys and all, and the previous project that was taken away from him by FSB. But I would say that right now Telegram is relatively free compared to some other platforms, and a lot of people using it. That's why perhaps they're using it, because that's relatively free and unmonitored and easy to encrypt tool to use. But we are raising a question how free society should be protecting their freedoms. And of course, free society should defend their freedom, by the way, via controlling certain platforms. If we're talking about defending free society, everything that's happening in the United States and other countries, this is the question that doesn't have an answer. We have seen, we witnessed, and we have got a unique chance to touch that successful, free society, to that free and successful civilization, and we're seeing how that free and successful civilization is being dismantled with instruments that were allowed to grow or that were built under that civilization, by that civilization. And therefore we're facing an important question. The civilization is facing a question. How can it be protected? How can we protect it? How can it protect itself? What do we need to do in the framework of this civilization? Because if we don't, then there'll be other tools that will grow within it that will lead to its suicide. And this is a non-trivial question. And we need to understand why preceding 4.5 centuries or 5 centuries, whatever was happening in the world, whatever challenges that civilization was facing, it managed to deal with them, with every single one of them. This is the first one that it is failing against. And the main challenge right now, of course, there are a lot of challenges coming from from outside, from Putin's Russia, from China, from other groups, but the main challenge that is facing is internal. And that internal challenge is stemming from cognition of many people who actually live within the Western society. So these 160,000, it would be interesting to see who of them are illegals, who of them are representatives of other groups, but it goes without saying that a significant part of these people are Americans, real Americans, born in America, who have grown here, who have got their education in American schools and American universities, who are working in American companies. So how this society, this nation, which was growing on the examples of American Revolution, on the examples of founding fathers, on those things that Americans were doing during the Civil War, during the First World War, Second World War, how on all these principles of Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States, Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, etc., how that society is changing, and changing rather rapidly, as we observe, into its direct opposition, into an instrument that will destroy itself. I understand we're going to that similar topic during our streams, but we are observing these trends in our society. And this is additional confirmation of the utter importance of this matter. And again, we're not going to discuss it, but I want to say here that the most important front between freedom and non-freedom is going not anywhere outside, but in the conscience of every human. And you cannot just build a wall and separate it somehow one from another. Building a wall is important, right? It's on the south to make sure our border is not transparent. But the most important line that goes in the cognition of each person, of each citizen, how come that conscience of a person who grew in a free country, who was educated based on the free principles, how is it almost destroyed by animus ideas that are decomposing it? And if we're talking about cognition here, we likely have to look deeper into education and the upbringing, and most likely with the system of education in the United States and other Western countries. So one can ask why that has not been so before and why is it emerging now. And I will say one idea that I think is important, and we can touch upon it today. And then perhaps you and I, with colleagues, we can pick it up in different streams and other discussions. But I think the main problem is related with nationalization of education. Let's remember how these universities, with which we associate the appearance of new free civilization, of the Western civilization, how these universities appeared. Those universities that were built in the medieval times in Europe, starting with the 11th, 12th, and the following centuries, were organized at the principle of free corporation. The Latin name universitas, before the meaning it has today, and became the title of the educational establishment, it had a meaning. It was used to name free corporations of people. And professors and students were a part of those. And in that corporation, students were picking their teachers, and teachers had a ability and opportunity. For example, if any student would not follow certain demands of the teacher, they could have pushed them, expelled them from their group. So there was no government involved in that. Students were funding their education, and there was internal process of selection teachers, tutors, and students. The moment these free corporations, free societies, growing and expanding, slowly became prone to government intervention. First of all, government financing, government regulation, government management, government endowments, government and those groups that are controlling the government or near the government, they got a chance to control the curriculum, to control the program of education and upbringing. Not people who used to be deciding what is needed. It was a mutual process between students and professors, because professors were offering what they thought is important, what they were ready to teach, and then students were asking, were demanding things that they were curious to learn. And instead of such a free market of ideas and demand for education, we then got a third person, a third group that was binding professors to teach certain things that have to be taught to students. And in several generations, government monopolized this role, became a very active participant of that system, and started pushing its position to the whole university corporation. And as a result, we have an education system in the United States that is 95 or 99% monopolized by ideology that is aimed at destruction of freedom. And therefore, in order to deal with these challenges that we're facing today as a Western civilization as a whole, we need to talk about what was not so much discussed, and in recent times I don't think it was even present in public discussion, about denationalization of education, about privatization of education, about removing education from the total control of the government. Those universities and colleges in the United States, which still, those few who still continue to carry the torch of freedom, those are, without exception, private universities and private colleges. Not a single one of them is government managed, dependent on the government. And that opens us a small window in the direction of where we need to be going. And the second direction, you also bumped into the same. We see the level of intervention from without being influencing the current education system of the United States. Recently, tens of billions of dollars became known, funded by Qatar, funding American education system, universities, to direct it against the ideas of freedom in a different direction. Therefore, we need to find ways to create independence, to maintain independence with the national education system from intervention by other sources which are actively pushing the agenda of destroying the Western civilization. And these are two obvious questions standing in front of us. This is definitely a program not for one day, and it's not going to be solved at the 5th of November this year. This is a generational problem. This is decades long. But we need to start solving them today. And this will be our chance to get out of that noose into which the Western civilization, via the Western system of education, became involved or got itself into. We have indeed touched on this topic, Andrei, different sides of it, different aspects. And one can say that, undoubtedly, it is the root of all these evil things that are happening in the adult society. It starts from education. And sad as it is, we are observing it. As you mentioned, nationalization is definitely an issue, but even private colleges are contaminated with this virus. It comes from different sources of funding. And of course, Qatar and the other places like that, which very often ends up defining the direction of education. And soon we see some of those young individuals in the vicinity of Chicago dressed accordingly in Middle Eastern traditions with all the slogans that Elena was talking about. And this is a long-term goal, as you mentioned. But what do you think? Do you think Trump, who definitely would have to bring something against that amount, that volume of lies and untrue information that is being sent not only from Democratic Congress, but also by legacy media? Being, for example, imagine yourself being his advisor. What would you advise him to focus on? Well, first of all, I want to say I'm not his expert or his advisor, right? Oh, I understand. This is just to model it. Okay, first. Second is, given the situation and condition he was in and situation he was in during his presidency, during the 4 years of his presidency and during 4 years after his presidency, the degree at which he was attacked from all directions, just from the human standpoint, I am amazed at where does he find powers to resist all that, to fight all that, to keep his spirit about him, and also keep charging other people with his energy, with his positive emotions, and with his optimism and hopes. Huge numbers of people fall under his influence, and even we see this image immediately after assassination attempt on his life. He literally was a couple millimeters, less than an inch away from being dead. He immediately rises up, turns to people with blood on his face and chants, "Fight, fight, fight." So in this regard, I have no doubts about his personal dedication, devotion to what he thinks is right, what he thinks is good, and what should not be allowed. Of course, Trump is not an angel, just like any of the humans, and he doesn't know answers to all questions. He definitely needs help by many people, help of millions probably, which we all need to provide in different directions, including educational, long-term direction and short-term direction. Short-term program for remaining 2.5 months before the 5th of November we have left, as it seems to me, it would be most important for him or correct for him to concentrate not on advantages or disadvantages of presidential candidate on the opposite side. I think every normal person, normal human can see those. It would be more important for him, I think, to concentrate on what he can bring to American society compared with his opponent, and what United States under his presidency, or how they would be different and could be different under his presidency from United States under Kamala. And here I think this is a huge field to demonstrate differences. Because right now we can see some somewhat coherent statements from the side of Kamala about the future that her team is painting for the United States. Frankly speaking, in the economic sense, this is a concentration camp. This is a economic concentration camp that they're planning. In political, in moral, in relation to freedoms, there are already remarks being given to that, and we'll see more commentary on their plans. And I think it would be more correct for Trump and his team to also concentrate on this, on how tomorrow for America, for American society, and for each American will be different under two possible scenarios. You know, Andrei, let's mention something good as well. The president of Columbian University, Mel Shafik, was resigned from her position. She is the person who had done nothing during that anti-Semitic wave of protest that was unfolding on the campus of Columbia University. I don't know if her resignation will affect the future destiny of university, where they have implemented all pro-Hamas slogans. They're already part of that university and what they stand for. Many sponsors are leaving Columbia University and don't want to have anything in common with them. And we're talking about private education that costs a lot of money. Huge money, actually. These money were paid by Qatar. Not only Qatar, there are also Chinese money in there, and there always have been, for a while at least. Chinese party is actually buying a lot of seats for their students. And we can talk about the good things. Let's look at what Trump needs to concentrate upon. He made a suggestion to Elon Musk, made an offer on Monday, and he suggested Elon to occupy the position of an advisor in his administration if he is re-elected in November. Elon Musk, verbatim, wrote in his Twitter, "I'm ready to serve." In the evening of Monday, he posted a probably AI-generated image of himself at the tribune of the Department of Effectiveness of Government Management. So if we will have such a department created, Musk would likely want to be there. Do you think this could be effective? Do you think this could become a reality at some point? Well, first of all, Elena, it's good that they're communicating. In any case, this is a good story. It shows that despite a lot of negative things, there are good things, there are positive things happening. We can see that at least half of population of the United States, at least half of our society has not lost their heads. And they keep their bearings and adequate understanding of the world. And there are some very bright representatives of that group, including such as Elon Musk, who are not only remaining within their bearings and within their values, but also have good ideas, even in the world of AI and with new technology emerging around us. I think the main idea here would be, though, not to create a new department for the effectiveness of government management, but to liquidate the unnecessary departments, the ones that we have aplenty. And one of them we have touched upon carefully in a previous segment of our discussion: Ministry of Education and control over educational programs. I think this one could be liquidated. And this liquidation would not only harm anything, but it will bring a lot of benefits. But deep review of the system of American governance could also highlight a bunch of other institutions, organizations, ministers, and departments that could be either shrunk or completely liquidated. The best periods of economic growth of the United States of America were the last third of 19th century, which I think from the easy hand of Mark Twain it was called Gilded Age, and the Roaring Twenties, early in the 20th century. If one would look under the hood and see what government expenses did look like at those times, then the modern citizen of the United States, today's citizen, may be actually shocked upon seeing these numbers. Because today, United States is consuming 35% of GDP. So roughly speaking, out of $100 earned by a country, 35, one way or another, go to the government, go through the government. In the Roaring 20s, there were only 10 to 11% going through the government. And during the Gilded Age, 3 to 4%. And probably not surprisingly, that's why those ages were Roaring 20s and Gilded Age, because the economy was developing with gigantic leaps and bounds. There was no extra pressure of taxes. There was no extra pressure of government stifling regulation. There was no group of millions of people which are using the products created by hands and minds and creativity of millions of citizens for themselves, and who are denying the chance for the others in the society to create more. We're going to dedicate more time to that matter, maybe during our next conversation, but up until 1999, not till 2000, but till 1999, during the 500 years preceding that date, one could observe a stable trend of growing difference between the levels of development of the Western society, which United States are active part of. They, of course, joined that group later, did not join them in 1500s, but they were about 150 years late to that. But still, Western countries were growing the abyss of economic development between them and any other kind of societies, Islamic, Orthodox, Christian, Buddhist, etc. They continued to evolve much faster economically than all their opponents. The economic machine in the West was built in such a way that it was looking for talented people, that it was providing enough support and means for them so they could realize and implement their ideas. In 1999, if we follow the statistics, this machine has broken. And for the last quarter of a century, up until today, the disparity between the Western countries and the other civilizations is shrinking, and it's shrinking in a very rapid order. It tells us that not only about the other countries that they figured out how to support capable people, but it also indicates that this mechanism is broken in the West now. And it wasn't broken by itself or by neglect. It was broken by intent. And it was broken by those people whom we did talk about before, and we continue to bring them up in our discussions. As long as this machine is not fixed, or at least another one is not created in its stead, meritocracy machine, not moronocracy. or idiocracy, which are supporting people not by their ability, but by some other criteria: the color of their skin, the level of their position, other merits, not their real merit, not their ability. Until we restore meritocracy, the Western civilization and the United States as a part of it have no chance in the future. If such a talented man as Elon Musk, together with so capable of a political figure as Donald Trump, will focus their effort not on creating a mechanism to create a more effective government management, but rather to rebuild that machine that will appreciate meritocracy for the whole American society. That, I think, would have been the best idea. And that would really give a chance both in short-term and mid-term and in long-term perspectives to really exit that deep and long systemic crisis that the United States and the Western civilization in large are in. You know, I regret that Trump does not have Andrei Illarionov as his advisor. Advices of that caliber would be really useful, I think. I do hope that they do have some people in his team who understand economy and who understand education systems and who are not for big government systems, remembering good old Reagan times. Even though people are saying that Trump is not necessarily staying close to the classic moves by Reagan, but still. And we can go to the questions, perhaps with a generic one first. How do you think, what can be brought to not only America, but the world at large by Kamala Harris at the office and by Donald Trump in the office? What can one or the other do or affect? How that could affect events in the Middle East and the European continent? Well, the main conclusion, we already talked about it. From the point of view of economy, it'll be economic concentration camp. It's not a random event that Washington Post and some other publications figured out that this is a dangerous proposition. They understand that they likely will also suffer if that thing unfolds. And this is one of those dangerous ideas that permeate a Democratic Party and may actually lead to their demise in the coming elections. So, understandably, that what Kamala is calling upon and what she will be doing if, God forbid, she finds herself in the presidential chair. Understandably, what's going to happen if Trump will prevail. There'll be nothing fantastic, amazing quickly. It'll more likely be a very difficult and prolonged fight. So this is what we need to keep in mind. Even if Trump prevails in the elections, we understand that in one day or in one night, nothing will change. We'll be facing a gargantuan and very difficult task that will take a lot of time, and there are no guarantees for success, really, both on the inner front and on the foreign political front, because the right side of America, the free side of the United States, has a lot of enemies, not only inside the country, but also outside. And they are picking Trump as their opponent. They are attacking Trump, not Kamala. And not surprising that his election campaign was hacked by who? By Iran, right? What relation did the fellow who attempted to kill the president, whether he had any relation with other internal or foreign powers, big question mark. What relation does FBI have to this event, who very quickly erased all traces from the roof of that shack where he made his shots from? And now we also know that his body was cremated, so all the traces have been destroyed for future analysis. So this all may indicate that Trump does have a lot of enemies, and those people, that free part of the United States that he represents, there are a lot of enemies of that group. And that work will not be easy, will be hard, and it will be definitely, we'll have to go through a bunch of problems, through some crisis perhaps, where there'll be different forces trying to exacerbate situation. Elena told about the crowd of fanatics that gathered around the Democratic Convention. I was looking at their faces, and I was noticing what's a striking differences between the convention of Republicans and the convention of DNC. Similarly, it's two events of the same kind, right? People supporting their politicians. But if you bring any psychologist or anybody with medical education into the room, you can see that in one case, there are people who are attentively listening to what is being said and reacting not immediately as a dog for the impulse, but they think it through and then they react. And the other group doesn't even think. They start jumping and screaming almost as if they were prodded to do that. That fanaticism was just leaking from them. Before that, I could only see that maybe in the Gaza sector and also in some case of Putin's crowds that he gathers in Russia. Because, and again, just some of them. He is incapable of fanaticizing too many, but there were some. Oh, and with Chinese Hunwei Bins too. And that's what we're seeing here. So I'll say once again that the fight will be not easy. It will be very complicated. And God forbid if it happens so that the results of elections will be different from what we would want them to be. The fight will not be done with on the 6th of November. We sincerely hope that we can prevail in the coming elections, but regardless of the election results, on the 5th of November 2024 in the United States of America, the slogan that Trump voiced on the 13th of July, and the slogan that said Winston Churchill in May of 1940, regardless of where we will be, on the beaches, in the dunes, or in the streets of our cities, we will never surrender, we will never give up, we will continue the fight. And this is true for Britain of 1940, for United States of 2024, for any other place on our planet, as long as there are free people who are fighting for the ideas of freedom and human dignity. We will never surrender, we will continue the fight, regardless of what will be happening around us, regardless of what will be happening with one leader or the other who is in charge. Winston Churchill made the speech during the Second World War, where they had a foreign enemy. Now we're talking about inner enemies, about the foreign enemies who are helping the inner. It is important to recognize that. It is important to also recognize that the number of useful idiots in our society in the US is through the roof. I was watching the speech by Hillary Clinton yesterday, and I got actually some satisfaction, surprisingly. And I wanted to say, oh, Musk, I know you. She was lying as she was breathing. And I did like one point there. I actually put it in my Facebook and my social. I made a few screenshots of CNN that was broadcasting her, and the online commentary. Almost 90+% of all the comments were ending with MAGA 2024. This media is so destructive that they're actively, at the end of it, working for Donald Trump's campaign. In their speech, in their lies, they also add to that. But we're still talking about the main enemy that still exists that Donald Trump could not win over. We are also talking about the Global Economic Forum, about the Great Reset, under the slogans of which were coming and are still coming, Barack Obama, and his then Vice President, today's President Biden, and of course Kamala Harris, and of course all of that group of Davos elders. They continue their destructive activities and they will be resisting us till the end. For example, European Union now, they want to close Twitter. They want to close X because they don't like what's being said there. And that big brother, big censorship, all that spewing from that angle Do you think that one man, Donald Trump, the one who rebelled against the system, do you think he can win, he can prevail over that system? Well, Elena, I would say probably it's not a system. No, Andrei, I think it is. Well, right, there is a system that is consisting of disjointed and discombobulated different groups, and we should not, however, undervalue the forces of freedom. It is not only Donald Trump. With all my respect to him and his amazing abilities, alone he would not be able to prevail. It's only millions of people who can prevail. When we join together, when we work together, when we continue the fight together, when we're not putting down our arms together, who basically following that same slogan, fight, fight, fight. Millions of these people who are supporting that position do have a chance. And that's why we should not forget about, of course, our Donald Trump and each other, and help each other together. And if the other side is joining their ranks, both inside and outside, we should be doing the same. At least we should not be repudiating this probability, this option. We should be fighting together and do not surrender any position without a fight. I would suggest do not surrender any positions at all. Exactly. Thank you, Andrei. And frankly, we are here every time on every stream. We're trying to convey the truth, convey that angle of freedom. This is our place where we come to bring the words of truth to people, to support each other. That's the main thing we can do. And of course, to vote, right. The voting day is upon us soon, but regarding uniting, we definitely are supporting that. With all people representing freedom, we are ready to cooperate in all the good deeds. And I want to say that with Andrei Illarionov, we have, I think, an established and lengthy friendship. So I suggest our viewers now to use the last minute of this show to click the like button, subscribe if you have not done that yet, to both Kontinent USA and also to Andrei's channel on YouTube. Follow his analytical articles in different media, and we do appreciate your support. If you're listening to us, that means that it is important. That means that we still have a chance to prevail. Andrei, thank you so much. It was very interesting to discuss our current events with you, our current problems. And despite all the busyness, I understand your schedule is busy, same as ours, but I do hope that we'll see you again rather soon, and it will be in autumn, perhaps maybe in September. Igor, thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you for advertising our channels and for your support. Likewise, to support yours. Elena, thank you very much for participating in this useful meeting, I think. Till later, till we meet again. Thank you all.